bought this land in June 2022. There were so many plans, so many dreams. I was done with the city, I'd worked hard, and I gave up much. I thought nothing would stop me, but everything got complicated. I spent 3 years going from failure to crisis and back again, finding bad excuses, having good ones, and just losing my way. 3 years to the day, I'm pushing back Armageddon. Today, I move forward, accepting failure, breaking barriers, and finding peace. In my own Zen Armageddon. Welcome to the property. So I've been coming here for 6 years and owned it for about 3. It was owned by a friend of mine and I had to find a way to be able to buy it from him. And it took about 3 years to do that, and then finally got a hold of it. And the last 3 years have been rough, and for a lot of reasons, which I'll probably get to over the life of the channel, but I figured I'd start by telling you how I got to here and today. So it all started with that, the culvert. I'm in an unorganized township, and part of that is that generally speaking there's not a whole lot of rules. There are rules for some things. It's at your own risk if you decide to not follow them. I wanted to get a 911 number for obvious reasons. I also am going to want to get building permits and all that sort of thing, so that way everything that I do here is right, so that it doesn't cause me issues later on. This area has a road board. I called them and arranged for the culvert, and they sent me to the Ministry of Transport. That is the one that installs it, and they told me that I needed an 18-inch culvert, which seems a little bit ridiculous considering the top of the watershed is right there, so the amount of water that's going to come down here is trivial. But they had their rules, so I bought the culvert, brought it here, and made a date. About a week later, they came in. They put a little patch of gravel here, so that way I could at least pull the truck in. I decided exactly where I wanted to put my driveway in. Before that, I'd spent quite a few years trying to understand everything about the property. It's 220 acres. That is a lot of space. Trying to figure out exactly how to manage my way through it was a lot of work, just because it is so big and there's a lot of terrain features that, you know, make it difficult to put a driveway through. So about a month after the culvert went in, I ordered an excavator because I wanted to be able to get as far in as quickly as I could. Before the excavator came, I thought I'd get a head start and make sure that I was going exactly the right place, working my way through by hand. And I didn't film any of it because I really needed to get as far as I could, as quickly as I could. But one of the things I learned pretty quick is when you're getting a machine, don't try and beat the machine. It's faster than you are. I wasted a lot of time and energy, completely unnecessary. Now, I nearly died just over there, about 100 feet up the road. We'll get there in a second. So after the excavator came, my father-in-law drove it for the first week, and I used it in fits and starts just so that way I could get used to it. But my father-in-law made sure that, you know, the actual work that needed to get done got done. In the first week, I got 90 tons of gravel delivered, so that way I could have enough driveway that I could get the truck well past the entrance, so that way if I was here and I was going through the bush, I didn't have to worry about somebody seeing my truck and deciding they wanted to have a look. And it wasn't long after that I started noticing these plants growing. Anybody knows anything about these and how to deal with them, it would be great. These are false climbing buckwheat. These plants are actually native to this area, technically speaking, but they act like an invasive. I put the road through here and they get everywhere. They grow up trees, they grow up anything that I want to plant, and they spread like wildfire. And I'd like to figure out a way to control them, if such a way exists. It climbs and twists. it wasn't for the fact that it tried to take over, I wouldn't care. So yeah, put down the gravel, and I didn't have any culverts, and because I wanted to see how did the rain work out, where did the water flow, what areas were problems, and so forth and so on. Where we are right now is where you first came into this video when we dropped a tree that was right there. And that tree was, I don't know, 80 feet tall. And my father-in-law was digging at it carefully. It wasn't the first one that he's dropped. He wanted to push it out that way across the bush, away from the road. I was standing here. I thought I was more than far enough away, but turns out I wasn't. He had dug in and missed one of the roots. So as it started to fall, it caught on that root and twisted this way. So I booked it in that direction. Yeah, I estimated the difference between where it was and its height and where I needed to be reasonably okay, but it was way too close. If I hadn't recognized that it was falling in my direction, I could have easily been beamed by branches or something else that could have taken me out. Yeah, that was one of my first real experiences, recognizing that what I'm doing here is dangerous and I need to have my wits about me. That right there, that's the tree that had it out for me. This other one over here fell off into the bush that way, the way this one was supposed to go, and it didn't so much. So one of the interesting things about this property is there's actually a fault line that runs through it. It's not active, I don't think. It's been a long time if it has been. It goes this way, north and south through the property. This is the bottom of the fault. You can see the pieces of rock. I went back there with the excavator just seeing what I could find, seeing how deep it went. It goes off that way, and then ultimately about 1,000 feet that way it kicks up and goes across the property. That's why I had to bring the driveway through right here, because as you go further south, there's a very, very deep ridge. So it's high on one side, high on the other side. And it would have been really expensive to fill it, to get enough gravel in to be able to bridge it. Whereas this particular spot is relatively low on that side, relatively low on this side, even though there's a little bit of a rock right here that I needed to bring the driveway around, which hopefully at some point I'll be able to break so that way the driveway is a little straighter. I came through here, and one of the first places that I had issues was here, that the water is coming down from here and then fills up and starts to overtop the road. The following spring, I rented a smaller second excavator, dug up this section, put in a culvert, and I haven't had any water problems since. So, like I said, I got about 90 tons of gravel, which was enough to get me about, I don't know, 200 feet in. And that was because most of the terrain on the way in was just solid rock with almost nothing over top of it. So all I needed to do was level out the roughness in the rock, so that way it was drivable and I was good to go. But after this point, from here, and the driveway total is almost 1,200 feet long. From here on, it is, well, this section is sandy clay that I collected from a clearing that I made up there. And then after that, it's just pure muck. Now, since I got the second excavator, I bought several culverts, so that way I could make it less bad, but it's still problematic. Different times of the year are worse, spring being one of them. But I have, through here, I dug a long trench, goes through a culvert under here, and then follows the edge of the fault line that way. So as you can see, there's a lot of water piling on the road, and part of that is when I came through here, I couldn't build enough height because I didn't have enough material to round off the top of it, so that way I could easily make it through. But when I was doing this section and clearing a place for the water to go over here, so I made a bit of a pond area here, so that way the water could actually collect, and then it started building up, and I realized that it was basically trapped there, and it would keep going up until it would top the road. And so I drove the machine in there and started digging and found an enormous amount of rock. Some of these are like the rock that's in the area, just sheared from the fault, but a lot of it is river rock, round cobble. I thought when I bought the property that there's probably gravel here somewhere, and that really helped reinforce that, because if there's round cobble collecting on this edge, then my expectation is that on the ridge back here, there's probably gravel on the other side of it. Over the last year, I've done a fair bit of things to try and facilitate that. In that journey, I really got disheartened because it's been so much work. It's taking so long. You'll see later whether I actually found it. The first excavator, I made most of the driveway all the way to roughly the house site. But I had a couple sea cans and a couple sheds that I wanted to bring out here so that way I didn't have to pay for storage elsewhere. So I needed somewhere to put them, and I needed to make sure they were out of the way so that way nobody's bothered by having to see them. So I cleared a space right here. It's about, I don't know, 1/10 of an acre. And when I was doing that, I found on the back side of it a very sandy clay material that I used to sort of level this section, and then I pulled it down all the way to where the gravel ends, right about there. So that way it did build it up so it's not as peaty and mucky. Obviously, given the amount of water, it's not ideal, but it's certainly better than it was, and allows me to get the truck back here most of the time. So these containers were brought in by truck, obviously, put here, and they're not necessarily intended to be permanent, and I can't really use them for anything because they're full of stuff. I also put in this little sad shanty, just so that way I would have a place to be able to come out, commune with nature, enjoy the property, not have to be in the city, have a fire, and relax. In some ways, that became a bit of a crutch. While I enjoyed it for sure, it didn't move me forward. And one of the problems here is that I need to figure out action. I need to start doing. That's part of the reason why I'm doing this YouTube channel, because it is something that is going to keep pushing me forward. One of the things I found after the first year was the water comes from up here and then comes down, and then in front of the sheds would become a small lake. I dug with the second excavator. That right there is the ditch. So for the most part, I don't have to worry about that much water here, but I still need to get a little gravel because after it rains, it gets really slick and slimy. It's a possibility that I might get stuck at some point. Now we're going up a little bit of a hill away from the sheds. In the second year, I put a ditch all on this side, which helped a lot with the water. It's not perfect still, but it's a lot better than it was. At the top of the hill, I put in another culvert. So that way I can go over there where I think there's going to be quite a few trees for building. I also cleared a half an acre here that I intended to put some structures on. As it happens, I am. You can kind of see it there. Next video. I also started a garden, put in some potatoes. One of the realities of this land is it's actually mostly swamp and rock. Well, it's 220 acres, about 40 of that is swamp and or miscellaneous water. I would say 3/4 or more of the rest is exposed rock with trees. One of the reasons why this area is important is I have enough soil that I could actually grow something. But it's going to require a lot of amendments to make it suitably fertile. From way behind the truck over there where the gravel stops, there's about 200 feet of that sandy clay. And then after this point, it becomes almost pure clay. Worst kind of muck imaginable. Just over there, I got the backhoe really stuck one day. I've nearly got it stuck, I think 3 or 4 times on the driveway. So that's one of the reasons why I have to find gravel here, is because I don't like getting the machine stuck. And one of the big problems with that machine is that it's very tall. For me, it feels really tippy. I've got a really sensitive inner ear. I feel those movements side to side that I get from the machine, and it terrifies me. I avoid using the machine because it's so uncomfortable. As one example, this area here where you see all the water, those are ruts from getting the machine stuck. It took me almost 3 hours that day to get the machine out using the hoe. Well, it was not a good time. This stretch is not too bad. I've been doing some manual work with shovels, redirecting the water to either side. It doesn't pool as badly, but even now as I'm walking across it, I'm sinking, a 1/4 inch into it. So I'd be afraid to drive the machine. This ditch works really well. I used that second machine just riding along it and scooping it along, and it really did a good job of getting a nice, deep, consistent ditch. And because I started at the top end, I was able to use water itself to see how it was flowing and make sure that I had good flow as I went along. Now we're almost at the top of the driveway. This is where I have the backhoe currently parked. Put one more culvert right here, so that way I could go across that way, which is the direction of where I think the gravel is. This is the highest point of the driveway. I'm going to want to put the house around the corner over there. Right here, that line of trees that you see is the edge of the ridge that drops down into the swamp and creek that's in the middle of the property. And that swamp and creek is basically splits the property. Right now, I can't get to the other side. There is a lake on the far side. There's a public boat launch down the road, and I could bring a boat around. Haven't done that yet. Haven't bought a boat. But I want to have something that's a little more permanent. So one of the things probably next year is I want to put in a bridge across. So anyways, by next year, I want to be able to get to the other side of the property all year round. I could theoretically do it in the winter because it does freeze over, because there's some really beautiful scenery over there, and also gives me the opportunity to build other things sort of away from the house. And also would be really nice to have easy access to the lake to go swimming or whatever else. This is my backhoe. It is a 1974 John Deere 310A. It's way older than I am, and it even creaks and groans more than I do. This machine is the meeting point between what I can afford and what I needed. What I really, really need is an excavator, but those machines are super expensive, even used. I also need a loader because I need to be able to get the material from way back there to the driveway or wherever else that I need it. So backhoe, in theory, is that. It has the bucket, it has the hoe on the back, and should be able to do all those things. But this machine's so old and tired that the linkages don't work really well, and like I said, it's really tippy. It's not working the way that I hoped so far. As you'll see when we get a little further back in the bush, it is needing me to do a lot of the manual work that when I was here before with the excavator just did everything for me. So this is a machine that's going to be valuable in spite of its age, in spite of all of its problems. I just have to get over my own challenges using it. Part of that is continually improving the road, continually improving the trails that I need to go through so that it's less tippy and I can just use it as it is. Where we're walking right now is an old skidder trail. This property was logged, I'm guessing 40 years ago, maybe 50. They were here for the reason I think there's gravel, which is a huge stand of maple that's on the back. So they took some of the trees on this side, but they went back and got to the maple. So obviously, because there's already a beaten trail through here, I took advantage of it because it required a minimum of clearing. I came through originally with the excavator, and after I pushed the trail a little further back that way, I was coming back through here and through a track. Lesson number 2 with big machines is that you need to know how to fix them. And of course, I threw the track on a Saturday, so I couldn't even call the place I rented it from. But fortunately, my father-in-law, who did some of the early work, is a heavy industrial mechanic. I was able to then use his expertise and his help to get that track back on, which was That was a lot of work. Like I said before, I want to find gravel. Part of finding gravel is getting the machine back there. So last fall, I convinced myself that I needed to try and do exactly that. What I learned pretty quickly is I got the machine back here, tried to push over a single tree with the bucket, and unfortunately the bucket just flipped down. It did not want to push. There's no room back here right now to get the machine turned around easily, and I did not want to drive it out again because, well, it was just stressing me out. What I did instead was I started hacking my way through the bush. Using a chainsaw on my back, I pushed another 200 feet back into the bush. After I got to the end of that 200 feet, I was tired and winter was coming and I was totally not motivated. And I stopped. One of the risks for me right now is losing momentum. If I lose too much momentum, I'm going to run out of time. And so I needed to figure out, how am I going to motivate myself to get through here and do what needs to be done. Here you can see, that's that last 200 foot. So there's a tree at the end right there, and that is the end of the cleared road. Where I think there's gravel is another 1,000 feet. What I'm doing now is I'm going to walk back over there where I think the gravel starts, and I dig a hole. Either I find gravel and I find my motivation in that hole, or I don't and I dig another one. At some point I won't have motivation for that in particular, but then I know for sure and I can try and find something else. There's going to be tons of rocks. They're all sticking out everywhere. That's fine. Hopefully wherever I start digging, which is just going to be over here, isn't going to have any giant rocks, because I just want to see if there's gravel in and around it, or if it's just all just big broken stuff. And then from there I'll figure out what I'm going to do, because as we go down further down the hill, there's a plateau down there that I suspect has gravel as well, but it's going to have more dirt on top of it just because it's flatter, so the rain and runoff wouldn't have pushed it away as fast. I'd rather find it somewhere a little higher up because it'll be easier to get at, but we'll go from there. Well, if my goal was a hole, I got a hole. Now, it's not 100% disappointment. The hole is full of, well, what amounts to gravel. It's a bunch of clearly rounded river rock. But I got to the point where I'm clearly hitting against either a big rock or the rock face itself, but this more or less tells me what I was hoping to see, that there is definitely gravel somewhere around here, because this all came from either glacial or river in order to be rounded that much. So it's nice rock. It's just right here I've got about 3 feet of hole, and then a solid rock that I could spend hours digging around, but given how hot it is and how out of shape I am, yeah, I don't think I can do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go a little bit more downhill and dig another hole somewhere where there's maybe a little less overburden, certainly a few bigger rocks and see what I can find there. So in that other hole, I found a fair bit of gravel almost right away. In this one, there are actually fragments of the local rock, which makes me think I'm probably digging in the wrong hole. More information, I guess, but it's not exactly heartening. It does have some riverstone in here. This is why I want to use the backhoe, because it's so much work just to make such a small hole, whereas the backhoe would make a hole 10 times this size in about 10 seconds. It's the 10 hours of work to get it here. That's the problem. And I'd rather not do that work if I can determine where I should be going. Because if I find a more obvious gravel seam, then that's going to make my life a lot easier, and I'm going to have to spend less time wandering around with the hoe through the woods. Yeah, there's another cobblestone. So I mean, there's definitely some kind of gravel in here. There's more than other holes that I've dug elsewhere, so that's definitely a sign. It's just where is the right spot. There's still a fair number of pine trees here, so I'm wondering if we're not well drained enough here yet. But it's so hot. Just came off of winter and I'm not really physically used to the heat yet. So I'm at real risk of overheating and having heat stroke, which isn't going to do me any favors. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the shovel out here so I don't have to haul it back by hand, and come back in a couple days when it's a little cooler. Next hole, where I am right now, is probably 30 feet down from the top of the hill, and it's pretty much sloped evenly down to a it's probably a similar clay rock bench to where I had before, and then it goes to a cliff. So one of the things I'm now starting to think about is if all the clay washed off into the creek down below and here forever. There's a lot of stone in here. This handful is almost all river rock. And I'm starting to get sand too, which is even better. Yeah, that's gravel, all right. Booyah. So it's not nearly as hot and unpleasant as it could have been, but the black flies are out for sure. making my life miserable, but they're not biting yet, so that's a plus. But had to eat a few. Got a few in my eyes, got a few in my ears. Wouldn't want to be out here in a couple days. So this hole right here, that hole right there is full of gravel. Everything, almost everything you see there is gravel. The first 6 inches was rocky dirt, and then after that it was just all gravel. Happy day. Now I know that there's gravel back there, but that doesn't necessarily help me any, because it's still 1,000 feet back. I can't afford an excavator that would allow me to get back there really quickly, and it's going to require an enormous amount of work with the backhoe. At the same time, now I know I'm not chasing after phantoms. There's actually something there that's worth chasing after. What I need to do is plan my time, plan my effort, so that I can always be doing productive things. Pushing is going to become a theme of this channel, and how well I can actually successfully push myself. But also finding the barriers that keep me from moving forward, because if I can find a barrier, identify it, and kill it, then that means that I'm going to be able to make more real progress. What I want most of all is to move out here. I still have a house in town. I can't really move out here, practically speaking, until I have a livable place. That's because I have a family and I need to be present for them, and I have to limit how much time that I come out here for. But even so, it's only an hour away, and if I have barriers checked off, the things that are stopping me from doing it, the accountability of you guys, then I think I can do it. Even though I might be running out of time, if I can find some success with this channel, anything is possible. And to that end, thanks to James Alofs for giving me the motivation to get off my butt and do it. If I can leave you anything from here, failure is part of life, and I've failed a lot. It's cost me a whole lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of pieces of my soul. I've always found a way to scrape myself up off the ground and keep at it. And you only really ever fail if you stop trying. So fail forward, and we'll see you next time. And holy crap, the bugs are bad. Gotta get used to looking at the camera. Across deer fly. These little buggers, allergic to them. Do not like them at all.